Good morning, Genesis family. Welcome to day 20 of our 21 days of prayer and fasting. I want to say a thanks again to everyone that's made this journey with us, whether you've been like super consistent and disciplined or intermittent in the process. Thank you for just engaging in this season of praying, fasting, and believing God together for great things in our family, our church, and our community. I just want to give you some encouragement regarding prayer this morning. Probably one of the biggest principles about prayer that I've learned over the last several years. We read the story in John chapter 4. Jesus and his disciples are traveling from the northern region of Israel back to Jerusalem. And Jesus tells his disciples, I must go through Samaria, which was very uncommon. The typical route from northern Israel back to Jerusalem for devout Jews would take them far outside the region of Samaria because they hated the Samaritans. They were a mixed race. And they were also a mixed faith. They had intermingled with surrounding tribes and nations over the years, and intermingled not only racially, but also adopted various worship practices, but still considered themselves Jews, and the Jews despised them from a cultural standpoint. It's a lot of racial, social tension between them. So they avoided them at all costs. But Jesus intentionally takes his disciples through this region. They get there, they come to a well, which was a typical stopping point. It was the Buc-ee's of the day. It's where everybody just kind of stopped. And Jesus was resting. His disciples went into town to get food. And this woman comes in the middle of the day to draw water, which was very untypical. Typically, people came in the morning or the evening in the cooler hours of the day because it's very hot, very labor intensive. But she's come intentionally to avoid people. Jesus strikes a conversation with her, which breaks all of the cultural norms of a rabbi, Jewish rabbi, talking to a woman, much less talking to a Samaritan woman. This woman's astounded, but as Jesus gets to know her story, finds out that she's been married 5 times, she's living with somebody. Some theologians surmise that she was immoral and a homewrecker, and she was the cause of all of her divorces. And some theologians propose that she maybe just been the victim of trauma and grief and loss through breakup or death. But either way, this woman's broken and hurting. She feels distant from God. She feels ostracized by her community. And Jesus shows her dignity and value, reveals himself as Israel's Messiah and Redeemer. And essentially, she comes to faith. She recognizes him for who he is, runs back into her village, and just begins to tell everybody, hey, you've got to come hear this man. I think I have found Israel's Messiah, our long-awaited Redeemer. So villagers come out. By this time, Jesus' disciples have come back, and they're clueless. They're like, what is going on? And they went to get food, so they're trying to pressure Jesus to eat. Like, hey, know you're hungry. And Jesus drops this beautiful statement, which is kind of ancillary to what we're talking today. He said, but I have food to eat that you know not of. He said, my food is to do the will of my Father, teaching us that giving ourselves to the mission of God's kingdom is ultimately what fulfills and sustains us, energizes us spiritually. But Jesus tells his disciple, he says, look around, lift up your eyes. He said, you say it's 4 months until harvest. So from a calendar standpoint, a seasonal standpoint, it wasn't yet harvest season. Normally the harvest season was late September, early October, so it's probably June, contextually. And Jesus says, you say it's not harvest season. He said, but I tell you to open your eyes, look at the fields, for they are white and ready for harvest. Spiritually speaking, Jesus was saying, I'm always at work, and it is always harvest season. There's always opportunity for spiritual fruit, for spiritual impact to happen. He said the key is you've got to open your eyes. And over the years, I've learned that probably the most important part of prayer is simply allowing our eyes to be open to what God is already doing around us. That too often we approach prayer from the standpoint of what can I get God to do, what I need God to do for me, when in reality, the discipline of prayer, just taking time to be with God, is the opening of our eyes. becoming more aware, more attentive to what it is that God is already doing, and then just aligning ourselves with that. That's where spiritual life and passion happens, when we get on board with what God is already doing around us. So I encourage you today, and throughout the remainder of this year, in your time in prayer. Obviously there are times to ask God for things. The Bible's clear that we're to come before the throne of grace to ask for help in our time of need. Jesus told bring your needs, your cares, your concerns to him, but also see prayer from the lens of, God, open my eyes, help me become aware of your presence throughout my day, on my drive to work, at school, at work. I'm sitting at the ball fields watching my kids' games, that you are at work. It's harvest season because you're always at work, and help me become more aware of what it is that you're doing around me, so that I can be responsive to that, so that I can be faithful to that. So love you guys. Hope you have a great weekend. Hope to see you Sunday at 10 o'clock. Julie Young is coming to wrap up our Reset series. It's going to be phenomenal. So we want you to make plans to be with us Sunday morning, 10 o'clock. Have a great weekend.